This isn't some Shutterstock BS. This is Lake Wissota.
Hey folks, let's spend some time with friends up north. Pat Kreitlow of Up North News is on Lake Wissota. Kristin Bry of As Goes Wisconsin is along Lake Michigan. And up on Lake Minocqua is Kirk Bangstead of the Minocqua Brewing Company. Wherever you are, welcome, because you're up north.
Thank you, John, and thank you to them Cooley Boys for music that tells us we have made it up north. I'm Pat Kreitlow, managing editor of Up North News, WI.com.
And I'm Kristin Bry, and you can find my social media videos at As Goes Wisconsin.
And I'm Kirk Bangstead of the Minocqua Brewing Company.
So coming up on this week's show, Tom Tiffany is caught lying about COVID. He admits advising his kids against getting vaccinated. And the supposedly pro-business Republican even suggests boycotting small businesses up north that try to keep their customers safe.
And we also speak to Bob Kovar, who thinks that transparency and democracy in the Northwoods has been railroaded by local boards who approve ATV trails against the wishes of their residents.
And we are going to talk about next week's election because we have another one. Yes, only 6 months after what felt like a huge election, we have local elections and a statewide race, and they're even sexier than Joe Biden. So,
sexier than Joe Biden's election, or because I'm imagining what are the Ray-Bans that he wears?
The Ray-Ban, yeah, the Ray-Bans and like the capped teeth. It's a look.
It's a sexy election, but like you said, these local elections, a little sexy.
Joe Biden's more sexy when he's like in his muscle cars that he owns. That I don't know whether or not that has to play much at all. North. But.
Let's be honest. I don't know what now he's 75 or whatever he is, but like when he was young, he was a stud. Like young pictures of Joe.
And look, let's face it, if the pandemic, hadn't not kept us from having an inaugural parade, he would have been driving that Camaro or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That would have been the epic way to go. But as it is, we'll tell you about the Wisconsin elections. Also, another seasonal thing in Wisconsin, and I'm asking this question for a friend. What's the number of Thin Mints you can eat at one sitting and not be embarrassed to share the number? I don't know why I'm asking. I just am. So,
dude, the podcast, right, Pat? People can't see that you're holding an empty box of Thin Mints.
I knew that you'd out me. So I can't even crinkle the wrapper too much because otherwise.
Is it actually gone? Is it all gone? Because I finished a box of Samoas. Or whatever they're called now.
The Samoas went away on day one. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, I finished the entire whatever was left, and my boyfriend was like, "Really? Mm-hmm. You left me nothing?" I was like,
"What's yours is his, and what's yours is." How does that go?
We're a team, we're partners.
Mine is mine, and what's yours is mine.
Hey, Pat, do you eat them cold? Because I freeze mine.
I have, and they're not bad. It's just that they never quite get there. So I've had them when other people freeze them. You're showing immense discipline, Kirk. I'm real. Or how many boxes did you?
No, you can order like 10 boxes and then freeze like the 9 while you're wolfing down that first one. And by the way, those Girl Scouts make small boxes, so I don't think you should feel too guilty because those boxes are tiny.
They're also $5 a box.
We're blaming box size now. Come on, people. We can do
pretty
better.
Expensive for cookies, aren't they?
They are worth every penny.
They're
Samoas. Come on. Oh. All right, let's get to a little news. On the pandemic front, there is good news. There's some bad news. Then there's some good news, and then there's some bad news. Let's start with the good news. Not only has Wisconsin passed 1 million people fully vaccinated against COVID-19, now all Wisconsinites 16 and older will be vaccine eligible starting next Monday, April 5th. It's all part of a greater supply of vaccine coming into the state, which started, sometime after January 20th. And it also is all about you folks who are stepping up to get those shots. But it's not all good news this week. COVID cases are ramping back up. Hospitalizations are ramping back up. And so Governor Evers and others are cautioning this pandemic is not over yet, Kirk. We can't be starting the party just yet.
No, we can't. And, what we saw what we saw in Hudson yesterday just blew my mind. And the reason we're segueing into this is because because Tom Tiffany is our congressman, and this guy is about as anti-mask and about as anti-vaccine as it gets, and he represents about 400,000 of us in Wisconsin, and it's bad. So I wanted to run through. Pat, can I run through a few of the hits from his listening session that was kind of going along with the news for the vaccine news today?
Yeah, it was earlier in this week for those folks listening. He was in Hudson, and we had an editorial in our Up North News daily newsletter about all the ways that, I mean, he just straight up lied. And Kirk, why don't you outline some of those?
So first of all, I mean, he said that young people are largely not susceptible to the coronavirus, which is not true, and that no one under the age of 19 has ever died from the coronavirus, which is also not true. I mean, we've heard this from the start. Yes, kids are probably not going to die from this, but they can still catch it and pass it along to those of us who are older who might die from it. It's like how often do we have to say this stuff to get it through some of these people's heads?
It's that young adult transmission risk that caused one Kristin Bry to go running and screaming out of California and come running back to Wisconsin here.
Yes, that's what got me to come back.
It was.
Yeah, I mean, he's always, I think the thing that I'm starting to get frustrated with is that I feel like the goalposts are moving. And like, I feel like, or at least if they're not moving, they're not being communicated well. And so I think that like on one side, we have like outright lies, like what Tom Tiffany is saying. And then we have we're the number one in like vaccinations in Wisconsin, and it's not over and numbers are going up. But I also feel like there needs to be more clarity of like because I'm kind of under the impression that we're never crushing COVID, right? Like COVID's going to be like you're going to get it. And the hope is that you don't die or like we don't overrun hospitals from it. Right. And so it's like with the increase of vaccinations, like I wish there was more clarity or better communication around like, it's going to not be the cases, right? Like it's going to be hospitalizations. It's going to be deaths that are the numbers to measure the pandemic. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that's where we should be focusing on as more and more people get vaccinated, of what the standard becomes of how sick people are really getting rather than the amount of people who are getting it.
Right.
But
it's not going to be
feel free to push back on that.
Right. But the problem that we're still going to face, much like a flu shot, like you said, we're not getting rid of the virus entirely, because we could never get everybody to just lock down and let the virus die out. So we try to minimize the impact as much as possible. It's why we encourage flu shots every year. It's why we encourage the COVID-19 vaccine, even though Tiffany advised his 3 young adult daughters, not to get it because he said that, young people don't transmit it as well. And that's just wrong. And the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention say so. And so you should be wearing a face mask. And so what does Tiffany say at this thing in Hudson? He says, well, I think about the small businesses that have mask mandates in place. That's their fault. And we get to choose whether we're going to do business with them or not. And this on the same week that the conservative-led state Supreme Court throws out the statewide mask mandate. I mean, this is a pro-business Republican, all but calling for a boycott of small business owners who are trying to do the right thing, keep their customers alive, keep their workers from getting sick. Like you said, Kristin, it's completely, counterproductive to the progress we're making.
So I'll never understand like why it's like the opposite world. This Trump started opposite world because it's like misinformation designed to help him get elected. But he's gone now. So I don't understand why they continue with opposite world, because wearing masks helps stop the virus. Businesses who encourage or demand mask wearing are responsible businesses. I did it at the brew pub all last year, but I got ridiculed for that as well because people believe Trump. Now it's like Tom Tiffany and Ron Johnson are like the substitute Trumpers who are just giving disinformation and now calling to hurt small businesses who actually care about health and are trying to get people to wear masks within them. It just makes it boggles the mind.
So we're going to have to face this on and on, but we have to transition into some more of the good news, because we've got more good news as well as the bad news, Kristin. And that's that there is this American Rescue Plan that passed through Congress, and Wisconsin's going to get a significant share of federal funds, which are meant to not just fight the coronavirus, but to be an economic stimulus as well.
Yeah. So I think the total number of money coming into Wisconsin is like $6 billion. And that's going to be broken up between 3.2, that is Governor Evers' responsibility to decide how that gets divvied up. And then there's another sum that is for specific programs. And then there's some that's going to local municipalities.
Right. And the fight for this is over the 3.2 billion.
Yes. So the fight, I mean, so basically to rehash what has happened. So in our Constitution is basically that how this federal money that is the $3.2 billion is divvied up is under the discretion of the governor. And so last week in the Truth in Spending Act that was passed in both the Senate and the state Senate and the Assembly, it was basically a bill saying that the legislature should have some oversight over how that money gets spent. And basically right before Evers announced how he plans to spend that money, he vetoed it. And so I think we all were bracing ourselves, is there going to be an immediate lawsuit like the precedent has said there probably would be, but so far, no. And so basically, if I can look this up, the breakdown of how Evers wants to spend the money is $600 million going to businesses. Basically between, I think, 50 million alone just to the tourism industry, which obviously affects up north, the Northwoods a lot. But then another 200 million for infrastructure, specifically for broadband, which is obviously a big part for up north. And then another 500 million for the pandemic response, basically testing and vaccinations. Mm-hmm. And so in response to this, yesterday, the Republicans had was it a press conference or was it?
It was a press conference on Tuesday.
Yeah.
They held, yes.
And so basically saying how they would spend the money if they had the money, but they don't. So it was basically just like grandstanding about how they would do.
I don't know. I thought you could set up a bingo card as far as what was going to be said. And of course, the free space would be tax cuts. And there would be business tax cuts, or maybe some more tax cuts for Foxconn or what have you.
But the big one was property tax cuts.
The big one was property tax cuts, right. Which,
of course, is a thing here, because I feel like the people who have been disproportionately affected by COVID are not necessarily property owners.
Right.
And I think the conflict of interest of a lot of our legislature who are not only property owners, but landlords.
Yeah.
And so that, I think, the teeth there, I think, like I said, it seems like they're not going to sue. It was basically them saying what they would do, but it doesn't feel like there's any follow-up here.
I wouldn't rule out at all that they would sue yet. And that would just slow down, the money actually being put to work in Wisconsin. But, Governor Evers put it very well when he was in Wausau on Wednesday. He said, a lot of small businesses don't own their property. They rent.
Yeah.
And he said, are they going to be getting that money through the Republicans' plan? Hell no. You see what they did? They made Tony Evers swear. And I mean, that's...
Wait, so Pat,
first time, I feel like he's said hell before.
Okay, once before.
I feel like there's a couple times that he's like a hell no or
there were a couple of swears,
like maybe a heck yes, but okay. I wonder how much he curses in like real life.
Wouldn't it be great if we could get somebody on his staff to come in and talk about how he drops an F-bomb like every fifth word or something like that?
That would be amazing. Like I do wonder how often
fake news
in the public figures of Wisconsin political personalities, who do you think curses the most?
Oh, trust me, as somebody who's
you've worked with some of them, so you probably know.
Oh my goodness, yes. Now, and they always kind of, I won't say they made fun of me, but I didn't cuss nearly as much. But it was all those years in TV where you assume every microphone is live. But yeah, there's more than a little bit of cussing that goes on in the Capitol. Probably.
Are you not going to drop any names for us? I feel like Chris Larson probably curses a fair amount.
Well, I didn't serve with him. I can't say. I would, if I were going to throw, somebody like a John Erpenbach under the bus, I wouldn't use his name in a podcast to say that. This seems like a good place to take our first break. So when we come back, we will talk a bit more about what's coming up in the next week here. It's a sexy election. We've laid it out. The local elections are sexy. Kristin's going to tell us more about that in just a moment. You're up north.
Won't you let me die?
This is the part of the program where we take a moment to engage in shameless self-promotion. And since this whole podcast was Kirk's idea, why don't we take a moment and let the man talk about what's new at the Minocqua Brewing Company? Kirk, what's happening at the Minocqua Brewing Company?
Thanks, Pat. Appreciate it. So we really care about gerrymandering and fair maps in Wisconsin. So one of the beers we just created is called Fair Maps IPA. And 5% of all of the profits of Fair Maps IPA and baby onesies and t-shirts and, tank tops and hoodies all go to giving money to try to get rid of gerrymandering. So we've already raised a lot of money. We gave it to Citizens Action of Wisconsin, who's calling voters in Hudson, Wausau, and Rhinelander to educate them about how gerrymandering is cheating and how the Republicans are trying to gerrymander our lines. And so I just want to encourage you, if you feel like you don't like gerrymandering as well and nobody should, then please either donate to the Super PAC or buy Fair Maps IPA or some of our merchandise. All the information can be found on our website at minocquabrewingcompany.com.
And we should note that Citizen Action of Wisconsin held an event in Wausau on Wednesday with Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, or toward Wausau, I should say. I'm sure some of it was virtual, talking about healthcare and the need for Wisconsin is long overdue to accept the Medicaid expansion and the importance of doing that. So we want to tip our hat to the work that Citizen Action of Wisconsin is doing too. So thanks for that, Kirk. Kristin, let's get in a plug for As Goes Wisconsin and what you've been working on lately, which I think also involves sexy elections.
Sexy elections. So we got content coming out on As Goes Wisconsin, which you can find at As Goes Wisconsin on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. So whichever social media you tend to be drawn to, we are there. But coming up, we're constantly just reacting to whatever the news is and trying to find the joke to both explain it and poke fun of the hypocrisy of it. But
Hey,
April,
at what point do you do on the TikTok version? Are you doing that plank challenge? Where you're throwing oh no?
I have not seen a plank challenge. I've seen.
They're throwing their arms up while they start in a push-up position, and then through dance, they're throwing their feet up and their arms up. It's like a one-arm push-up almost. I figured you were next on this.
This is how wild TikTok is, because there's so many users and there is so much content that just entire sides of TikTok are unknown to me, and you must be on some kind of fitness TikTok that I don't know of.
Clearly,
Pat, was that a couple years ago, Pat? Are you dating yourself?
Yeah. The fact that Grandpa knows that there's a trend on TikTok right now kind of scares me. All right, my edition of the fine print. As managing editor of Up North News, a digital newsroom you can find at upnorthnewswi.com or Up North News WI on social media. Don't forget the WI. I add right here that the Up North podcast is not a production of Up North News, but if this little show gets you to support it or any of our daytime jobs, well, isn't that a win-win for all of us? And also the Up North podcast is made possible by SiteCast, a leading nationally recognized website solutions firm based in the Northwoods of Wisconsin, because, hey, nerds live up north too.
All right, welcome back to the Up North podcast. I am Kristin Bry, who is on Lake Michigan, and I'm also with Kirk Bangstad on Lake Minocqua and Pat Kreitlow on Lake Wissota. I want to talk about, because I made my the big reason I did come back from California was not about vaccinations. It was to get out the vote last year. And so obviously coming off of a huge election in the fall of 2020, we are back at it with nonpartisan spring elections on Tuesday, April 6th. And so not nearly the same anticipation, I think, that the presidential elections always get, but positions and referendums that have way more immediate impact on your day-to-day life, such as city council and older person positions, school boards, appellate judges, like I said, referendums. And then the big one is the statewide election, which is the superintendent of public instruction, which was the position that Governor Tony Evers had before he became governor. So this can be a position for someone to not only run all of our public schools and our public libraries, but also could be positioning for people who could eventually run for governor. And so it's a race we had the primary back in February, and now it is between two candidates, Jill Underly, who is endorsed by basically the most Wisconsin teaching unions and the Democratic Party. Tammy Baldwin came out yesterday and endorsed her. And then Deborah Kerr, who is endorsed by the Republicans. And then basically the biggest difference I've seen between them is school choice. And basically Underly being doubled down on public schools and funding public schools versus Kerr, who has more opinions or is more about school choice, more about vouchers. And feel free for either of you for anything that I'm missing as far as that.
No, I think
summary.
from an up north angle, I mean, a lot of folks, I think, still aren't clear on how this very volatile issue has mushroomed out of Southeast Wisconsin. This started in 1990 with 7 private schools in Milwaukee as an experiment. It has now grown to 465 voucher schools that'll be getting tax dollars in the next school year, according to the Department of Public Instruction. But it impacts every district in the state, and here's why. When the Republicans set up the voucher school plan, they take the money out of the big general pot that helps fund all public schools, and they set it up so the voucher schools get paid out of the pot first. And then everything that's left is divvied up to public schools statewide. And property taxpayers don't even get to see that impact on their local school district. They only see the total amount of state aid coming to their local district. They think it's all going to their local school. Republicans didn't allow the property tax bills to show how much of that state funding was lopped off to go to voucher schools all around the state. So when you add it all up, prior to the start of the last school year, DPI estimated that public schools across Wisconsin would lose out on about $145 million that's going to private schools. And so that's how it affects districts all over up North Kirk. And there's plenty of people that are fed up with paying for 2 separate and not really equal school systems.
Yeah. So this is the deal. Like you're totally right. Like living up north, we don't hear about voucher schools because they don't have them. We generally have one public school in our little towns, or we have a public school and a parochial school. Like I grew up in Stevens Point. We had Spash and we had Pacelli, and that Pacelli was the parochial school. But so this means that my property taxes I'm paying taxes that are now being taken off the top and funding a charter school or a voucher school in Milwaukee. I don't think that's fair as a representative, and I don't think anybody would agree, Republican or Democrat, that my taxpayer dollars should be going to fund a non-public school. But the extra bit of this is that some of these charter schools or voucher schools aren't public, and so they aren't held to the same standard that public schools are. Like public schools have to take in everybody. If you've got cognitive learning disabilities, or you've got you're physically challenged, you have to, public schools have to build like ramps, for people in wheelchairs. We have to have teachers for those with special needs. These voucher schools do not have to do that. So some of our tax dollars are going to schools who can reject some of the most needy students in the state. And I don't think that's good, nor do I think that's fair.
And it would be one thing if these voucher schools were doing so much better than public schools, but multiple studies have shown that at best they're on par with public schools in terms of overall performance, and yet without the oversight. So is it really worth the money that's being pulled away from your local school? So that fundamental difference has never been more clear in a race for state superintendent of public instruction. And so that is another reason why, even though the turnout isn't as big for April elections as they are in November, It's a reason why you should be voting on April 6th for the DPI candidate that you think is better, as well as the local boards, the school boards, the town boards, city council. And to that end, we want to talk to somebody all about what the importance of local government is when it comes to something like whether ATV trails should be running around town or running through town. And there's reasons why you'd have either one. And Bob Kovar will join us to talk about that next.
Welcome back to the Up North podcast. I'm Kirk Bankstead on Lake Minocqua. Kristin Bry is along Lake Michigan, and Pat Kreitlow is on Lake Wissota. So joining us now is Bob Kovar from Manitowish Waters. And that's the one thing that's because one of the things I want to talk about this week was an issue that's pretty unique to the North Woods. It's the creation of ATV trails. Now, with most issues, there are two sides of the story. So the first side is the side that I'm more familiar with, and those are a lot of business owners in the area want more ATV trails along with snowmobilers, because for one, global warming has reduced the dependability of snow up here, and so snowmobilers don't have as long of a season. So ATVs are kind of like snowmobiles in that you can kind of drive through the woods. And so there's a lot of overlap in terms of who uses those. And so I understand that side of the story because I owned a brew pub up here, and I understand that winter tourism is declining. But the other side of the issue is that, creating ATV trails in the woods can disturb, the ecosystems of the forest. It can be very noisy and just, kind of disturb homeowners who are along those trails. And there's a lot of folks, especially the snowmobile folks, where if trails are right by their private property, some of these ATV or snowmobile tourists can, not really respect some of that property and kind of do some damage to private property. So that's the other side of the issue. So joining me today is Bob Kovar. And Bob, can you just tell us what side of the issue you're on and what's going on with some of these townships and how you think kind of transparency and democratic processes have been kind of trampled on?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And I happen to be a silent sports person, but that really isn't why I got involved. I got involved in this in the first place because I wanted to make sure that the process for deciding ATVs in my town, in Manitowish Waters, was going to be fair, representative, and was going to be reflect the will of the majority of all the property owners here in town. And so to that end, I kind of dove in with both feet and worked with the town board to get a survey sent out to residents and non-resident property owners with one question: if there should be ATVs allowed in Manitowish Waters. It was a little bit of we had to raise the money to do the mailing, which took about 20 minutes. And we had to put together the mailing list, which took a little bit of work, but and everything was approved by the town board. And the town board also was willing to put the question to the voters of Manitowish Waters on a referendum. So we had the survey go out and we had a referendum that voters weighed in on. And the results were pretty overwhelmingly that people did not want ATVs in Manitowish Waters. And the town board abided by that decision so far. And so to me, it was a real exercise in civic participation and democratic, little d, democratic process that I thought was, I was really pleased that it happened that way in our town. It also happened that way in Boulder Junction. The process was a little more drawn out, but it was basically the same where they surveyed business owners, property owners, and other taxpayers, and they was also defeated in Boulder Junction. Right now, because that defeat bothered the ATV people, they're running a write-in candidate to try and change the makeup of the town board in Boulder Junction. So the lesson there is that, this stuff can change pretty quick.
Yeah, it's all the more reason to know, who's on your town board or who's on your city council. And Bob, the thing that I always find fascinating about this, and covered things like this for many years as a reporter, is the debate you have between the residents of a town, the taxpayers, the property owners, the people who would hear the ATVs or the snowmobiles, but then you also have and this is no trifling thing, a business community that would like to route ATVs or snowmobilers through town because of the business that they bring in. And so you have some folks who, like you, want this to be small d democratic in terms of the residents voting, and others want the D to stand for dollars and what they bring in through the trails. And I'm sure that there are communities up north and elsewhere where, especially in a tourism-based economy, where the dollars outvote the votes.
Yeah, and I'm not unsympathetic to that. I have a lot of friends and family that own businesses here, and I totally get that. I think that right now, Iron County, for example, is wide open to ATVs, and it's a mecca for ATVers, and that's great. That's what Iron County wanted to do. I do believe, and many of us believe, that we have to preserve some of the North Woods for quiet and to preserve the beauty, the real reason why people come here. I think the one voice that doesn't get asked for their input are tourists. They're the ones that come up here and spend all the money. Why do they come here? Is it to hop on an ATV or a snowmobile? For sure, some of them. Is it to come and go cross-country skiing or ride a bike or paddle a canoe? Yeah, but we don't know. I've never seen a survey of those.
Bob, tell us, the reason that we have you on the show today is because you were part of a process in Winchester, the town of Winchester, that you really didn't like. Can you tell us what happened there?
Well, there was a group of us that started meeting after the Manitoush Waters issue came up from Winchester, Boulder Junction, and Manitoush Waters. We met every week to try and join forces and help each other out. The issue was hot in Winchester. We were able to convince the town board to go down the same route that Manitoush Waters and Boulder Junction did, which was to survey its property owners, which they did. And the result of that, again, was the majority of people did not want ATVs in Winchester, but the town board decided it didn't matter. They were going to allow them anyways. And I think that was a pretty difficult meeting, hearing, knowing that, that democratic process was followed, but sort of ignoring it completely in order to get the personal agenda of one or two town supervisors through was really disappointing.
So I guess as far as it being actionable for different communities up north, what can any individual, depending on where they side, if they don't want this, if they do want this, what is the chain of command as far as trying to get this to happen, get this not to happen?
Well, I think everybody should get involved in their town board meetings, to know what's going on. Town boards are, for the most part, listen to people that come to the meetings. And I think that the difficult When there's these single issues like the ATV issue, and there's money behind the ATV movement, whereas compared to the silent sports folks where there really isn't big money pushing silent sports as actively, I just think people have to get involved. And you can never give up, because what happens is if people decide they don't like one answer, they'll run other people for positions of power to get, what they want.
Yeah. So, Bob, thanks so much for coming in today. This is exactly kind of what I thought about when I envisioned coming up with this podcast, is to talk about issues, talk about government, talk about potentially good government or bad government. And in this case, unfortunately, it seems like it's bad government, and trying to bring transparency and bring some of these issues to light. So I appreciate you joining us, and thanks for all you're doing for up north Wisconsin.
Yeah, I just would like to say the good government also exists. Let's not forget that. And, even though there are people that don't necessarily agree, the process, the democratic process, worked in 2 of our towns. And I was really impressed with that.
Yeah, it really shows you again how those spring elections like we're going to have next week here all across Wisconsin really matter. Thank you, Bob, so much.
Thank you.
All right, we before we wrap things up, we like to look ahead. Obviously, this is Easter weekend. We hope it's a safe weekend for folks who might be traveling, finally getting a chance to see family. That's the one thing that's coming up. But I mean, come on. The other thing is coming up this weekend. It's already underway by the time you hear this. Baseball is back. The Brewers are playing the Twins, and then the Brewers are playing the Cubs during the week down at Wrigley, and then they're heading down to St. Louis. And my God, that sounds good to say again. If that's not a sign of spring, I mean, forget the buds. They're about popping yet. The baseballs are popping.
Sorry, would you say you're a bigger Brewers fan or Packers fan, Pat, if you had to pick?
Oh my gosh. I've always been more of a baseball fan than a football fan, but boy, it's tough to say it's tough to say the Packers come number 2 to anything here. So
I'm not saying here, I'm saying you personally, but if you feel like you're going to get some backlash for making that choice.
No backlash. I'm an old fogey who, loves baseball, and all young people should love baseball. And I want to read more about this thing called Banana Ball that is trying to speed up the game with all these funny new rules. And it's totally a wacky experiment, but I'm gonna get what those are. And on a future show, we're going to talk about whether that would draw more people into watching the game. I don't know, Kirk, what about you? Baseball versus football?
All I know about is that I've always admired the guy in his garage. It's like working on his car, and the ball game is playing on the radio, and he's just like passively listening to it, but working on his car on a weekend. I'm like, this is pure happiness and joy right here for this guy. And so to me, that's what, the American sport of baseball is like, it needs to be 3 hours so you can keep on working on your car while you're listening to it.
Kristin?
Oh, I mean, that's for me, it's easy. It's Packers. But fun story is I actually played Little League with all the boys when I was 9 years old. There's a sweet photo of me as a tomboy who went by the name Chris instead of Kristin. And you really can't tell if I am a girl or a boy because I'm 9. But yeah, so I tried to play baseball. It was not very good. They stuck me out in right field. But
no, not right field.
Maybe that's my distaste. I don't have a distaste for baseball, but I would say, but to be fair, I am first love is basketball, but then second love is Packers.
Well, then you're in the right place right now with the Bucks coming up on the playoffs and everything.
I know. It's been fun to I mean, we're so spoiled when it comes to sports, right? For being a state that has less than 6 million people, to have 3 MVPs, to have 3 teams that now, not always, but now are consistently good every year for the last couple of years. Packers, my entire life, we've been good. We are very, very.
But your
I know. I
not
can
as
say
long
that.
as
It's like
our lives.
because you have to remember, like Brett Favre came when I was like 6.
boy.
Oh,
if
it was
I'm
a
dating
long
myself.
dry spell
So
before
you
that.
guys had the years of the Packers not being good. My brother and my lifetime as Packer fans have been very spoiled.
Uh, Kirk, let's
Don
transition.
Makowski. That's
Let's
all I
the
gotta say.
magic man.
The
All right,
magic man.
let's transition into comments and emails that are coming in. Two things that I caught off of Kirk's Minocqua Brewing Facebook page. One says, my husband read the post about Tom Tiffany's advice to his daughters not to get the vaccine. The first words out of my husband's mouth were, well, that's one way to strengthen the gene pool. Tough but fair. And,
Oh, no.
and another one, Kirk, where you might have to defend yourself here. It says, I think this was in Milwaukee. It says, they didn't have any of the Kamala beer. They said it needed more aging and they were going to take more to Milwaukee in a couple of weeks. Question is, does Kamala know that she needed to age a little more for her beer?
Okay. It's yes, and I get it, and it's funny, but it's a beer we're talking about, not women. And but now that you brought that up, can I tell you a story?
Sure.
So Senator Baldwin was up north this last weekend, and I got a call, not from Senator Baldwin, but from a friend who said she was looking for Kamala and Biden beer so she could give it to President Biden and Vice President Harris. So we arranged, and because we had very little Kamala beer made, because it's, we're making it right now and there's very little to find in the state. I had to search all over the state of Wisconsin to find some cans of Kamala so we could give it to Tammy Baldwin and so she could bring it to DC, but we did it. So Biden beer and Kamala beer is now in our senator's hands and it's going to the people, their namesakes as I speak.
Did she promise that she'd get you a picture of them holding it?
I didn't ask. I felt a little bit, I didn't
gotta
want to
ask,
make it a marketing. Listen, I like marketing my stuff, but I didn't want to hornswoggle our senator.
Well, I think he's just playing the long game. I don't think it'll be that much longer before in some parade in Minocqua or elsewhere, you're going to see Tammy sitting in the back of a convertible. Maybe the Vice President Harris is there. Maybe you'll see some cases.
Kicking back a Kamala.
And you know who's driving that car. You know who's driving that convertible, don't you?
Sexy Biden.
There you go. There you go. All right. With that, that's going to be a wrap. Thanks for joining us up north, where we like our old fashions and old fashioned conversations the same way. Things where we can talk with and not at each other. We'll see you next week.
Let me die.